So we have a Armored Core 6 gameplay reveal. Here we go.
As you watch this brand new footage of Armored Core 6, I'm curious, what do you see? Armored Core or Souls?
I don't really have a... Oh, that's that boss from the cinematic.
Truth is, there's a bit of both here, honestly.
Right?
I recognize the three-dimensional combat of Armored Core. I've seen its familiar mission structure, its atmosphere, and the unrivaled customization potential that the mecha genre lays claim to.
Oh, that's badass.
But finally, no one can deny that there is a lot of Souls influence in this.
Ooh.
This hard lock-on is not traditional Armored Core. The pacing and the telegraphed attacks would not look out of place in a Souls game.
Sure.
Even the stagger system is basically Sekiro's.
I think that's good. I mean, there are things like, for example, I feel like a lot of games started adopting a perfect dodge or perfect parry system. Because a lot of people like... Yeah, he did get yeeted. A lot of people like perfect dodges and perfect parries. So you just have that all the time now. The same with like kind of having the heal mechanics that you have in Dark Souls. A lot of games have those as well now. I think that it's not necessarily just like, you know, the same developer, but it's like just game standards are changing and people like seeing this similar type of gameplay.
No.
Same as like a lot of games have double jump now. Why? We've had one jump, yes, but what about second jump? It feels good. That's why. It's that simple.
There's a lot I could say right now, but I'm honestly really tired of this whole debate, and I prefer to move on because there is now...
I don't want to have the debate whether it's like, oh, is this an Armored Core game or a Souls game? In the same way that like Sekiro isn't a Souls game, but it has elements of Dark Souls in it. It's the same as like Bloodborne is like not exactly the same. So like, I don't really give a fuck what type of game it really is. I just want it to be a good game. Fuck, who, like, yeah, I don't, like, who cares about labels, man? Like, I used to love mech games. I feel like mech games, like, when was the last time you ever heard of a mech game? Like, 2005? What the fuck ever happened to them? I used to love these.
So much more to talk about instead.
And I feel like also, why do we not have more mech games? Because like, think about how many microtransactions you could sell for this fucking robot. You could microtransaction gun, microtransaction boosters, microtransaction boots, microtransaction helmet, microtransaction colors, microtransaction little fucking riding thing here. I mean, come on. How are they not doing this? Like, I mean, no, really. I mean, I'm not trying to give them ideas. I'm just saying, let's be honest.
So, Bandai Namco has given me about 4 minutes of gameplay to share here today, but I've actually seen a lot more than this. Press were actually able to see a live demo of basically this entire mission.
Oh, wow.
And you know the best part of that live demo? It's that, unlike in this gameplay, the HUD, the heads-up display, was completely enabled. I paid a lot of attention to that, and while I don't have any footage of it, this is roughly what it looks like.
Okay, so speed, altitude, expansion, repair, scan, defeated small... Okay, alright, that's fine, got it. About what I'd expect.
Feel free to pause here, but I will break down this HUD more in depth later in the video so that you can understand it all. Now, I don't know why they haven't just shown it. I think it's actually the most genius part about the game that I saw, and I can't wait to explain why. But right now though, I guess I should just showcase the gameplay that I have been given.
Yeah, that's what I want to see.
In this mission, it's our goal to infiltrate this huge facility. It's occupied by dosers, who are addicts, basically. They're people that have been using that substance that's called coral as a drug. But the facility is also occupied by a group of arms dealers who have this RAD logo, and it's their machines that repel your intrusion as well.
I feel like also, like, look at how expansive these levels are. A game doesn't need to be, quote, open world to be an open world game. Like, I would say Dark Souls 1 is pretty much just as much of an open world game as Elden Ring is.
Well, in the showcase, From Software emphasized the multiple paths that you can take within the mission. You can sort of see those upper and lower paths here off to the left, and they lead to a bridge in the distance, but this player's build, at least, has very efficient flight capabilities, so they use that to take a more direct approach.
Yeah.
So, obviously, vertical...
Yeah, the point that I'm making is, like, the levels are just going to be very, very large, so it's not like you're only going to do one specific thing. Dark Souls 1 definitely makes it feel open world. Yeah, I'm surprised there's so many people that are disagreeing with that. I feel like Dark Souls 1 is extremely open world. Yeah, absolutely.
And horizontal flight is a big thing in this game. The energy consumption during vertical flight in particular reminded me a lot of the early generations of Armored Core. So you can fly upwards, but it's probably near impossible to achieve sustained vertical flight, which I think is a good thing, as it stops you from flying over what is clearly more level design than Armored Core has traditionally had, which is amazing. One thing that does seem different, though, is it seems like you're way more energy efficient while flying and gliding horizontally in this game, which is something that seems to be partly enabled by the Assault boost, which is basically a dodge boost that can be held for more distance and a continued overboost, so to speak.
It's like sprint, kind of? Like, how does that work?
Let me just pause here for a second. Did you hear that little beep? So
yeah.
We're now in range
Is that a
of those
lock-on?
enemies down there, and if you could see the HUD, then you would know that our lock-on has just automatically jumped onto the closest one. Our missiles are now primed, and we're now in what I'm calling a soft lock-on state.
Okay.
In this state, we still have really free, unrestrained, unguided movement of our mech, and it seems the lock-on can be freely moved between enemies. This should be more familiar to Armored Core fans because it's closer to the way that lock-on has traditionally worked in Armored Core, where you're responsible for keeping enemies within your sights in order to shoot at them, and the lock-on kind of does its own thing. So if we fire our missiles now, which they do, you can see one missile fly off to each nearby enemy, stunning them and giving us an opening to dash in and take them out one by one instead.
Oh, wow, bro, look at that hitbox. Holy shit. That is what you like. See, this right here is good. This is the kind of stuff that I pay attention to a lot. That is a godlike hitbox. Holy shit, that is insane.
Instead, except at some point, the player locked on manually, and now we've transitioned into what I'm going to call a hard locked on state.
Okay.
Now that the enemies are dead, hard lock finally falls off, but wait, there's more enemies up top, so the player goes up and commits to more hard locked combat against them.
Okay.
And again, in this hard-locked state, we see a lock that entirely dictates the direction you're facing. And that is not how lock-on has traditionally worked in Armored Core. In fact, the absence of hard lock-on is, I think, actually a big part of what contributed to Armored Core's traditional identity. So instead, you'll recognize this lock-on state from Souls. But before all the Armored Core fans get upset by this...
As a Souls fan and everything, like, I very much like just being able to lock on.
Perhaps rightfully so. Remember, the genius kind of is that the soft lock-on state, the traditional lock-on state, still seems to exist. And I think playing
and like, also, like, I feel like lock-on, the reason why I like lock-on is really just for the camera. Just so I don't have to constantly move my camera around. Even if my abilities weren't locked on, I wouldn't really care. I just want to be able to lock on with the camera.
That lock-on state will be viable, and it will give you benefits, although you're probably missing out by not hard locking on sometimes and allowing the player and their camera to be very bound to a single enemy and have your movement strafe around them perfectly instead. What's more,
Yeah, that
in
was
this
really
hard
cool.
lock,
Let's watch that
are
again.
them perfectly,
Look at
very
this.
bound to a
Look at
single
the way he
enemy,
dodges all
and
these
have
attacks.
your movement strafe around them perfectly instead.
That was fucking badass.
What's more, in this hard lock-on state, notice how all 4 missiles go to their single target here instead, as opposed to in the soft lock-on state where those missiles were spread evenly around the area to each enemy. That enables some really cool strategy, I think. And speaking of strategy, this player's combat strategy seems to be to use their machine gun to stagger these smaller enemies. Enemy stagger bars are seen here, and they build up visually just like they do in Sekiro, and you can see the moment that stagger kicks in here.
Yeah, I think, again, stagger is one of the other mechanics that I feel like after... Like, I'd say Dark Souls 3 is never you really had a lot more... Like, Dark Souls 1 and 2 have stagger, but I think Dark Souls 3, where you can, like, legit stagger the bosses and do, like, you know, visceral attacks on them, same as Bloodborne, Sekiro, and fucking Elden Ring. I feel like a lot of games now have stagger. Even Diablo 4 has stagger, for example. I think stagger is just a good mechanic. Makes combat more dynamic, yeah.
State,
that's like another thing that like every game has that now, basically.
And that makes it the perfect time to hit them with
Final
all your
Fantasy
burst damage, which this player does with their barrage of 4 missiles.
Wait, did that miss him?
This player does with their barrage of...
No, okay, it did hit him. I was about to say.
Or another thing you can do while the enemy is staggered is this.
Yeah, again, that's the kind of stuff that, like, it just feels good to yeet a fucking, like, some mech across the map. It feels good.
Yeet enemies so far with this kick attack.
Yeah.
Though, I feel like this enemy only flew so far because it was already staggered.
Oh, yeah,
in any
that's
other
true.
situation, the kick attack probably just builds up their stagger meter instead. Next clip. The gate was a major waypoint in the showcase, and it seemed to function a lot like a fog gate would in Souls, except when I watched, the player actually took about 10 seconds to hack open this gate. They were vulnerable the entire time they were doing that, and they even got ambushed during that process, so it's a cool way to sort of stop you from progressing too far. In Souls you can just like run past everything, so it's kind of good that they stop you doing that here. But here they enter a tight corridor, and these in Armored Core traditionally force you to fight quite differently than you would have out in the open.
Yeah, this is like
often
more
in
almost
past
like
Armored
traditional
Core games,
FPS
your
kind
missiles would become useless inside, especially if they're the type that fire upwards or outwards, and your long-range weaponry might not be as good either.
So that's really cool. Holy shit, that's badass. Let's watch that again.
Or outwards, and your
so it
long-range
just avoids
weaponry
that
might not be as good either. So
that's the kind of shit, dude. I love to see that because this is just straight up good gameplay.
That's
that
why
melee,
it's a good
though,
idea to have some close range parts
gameplay
to
is
help you
sick.
out in tight spaces, like shields now, or
yeah,
maybe in melee blades as well.
God
Speaking
damn.
of shields, they've actually added something that I've always wanted them to add in Souls, and that's a timed block system. So what we know from interviews is that shields now have this brief moment when you deploy them where their defense is way stronger. It happens here. See that pulse when they pull
Valheim actually has this too.
Pull it out? That should be a moment of optimal block, and that's obviously an incentive to perfectly time your blocks against strong attacks rather than just keeping your shield active. Or
yeah, Valheim has this, and so does Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Yeah, Valheim. Yeah, it's not. The thing is, like, a Valheim parry and a Jedi Survivor, like, parry with, like, a ranged attack, both of them have an offensive component. I don't think either of these have an offensive component.
The time. Next, melee weapons. You can clearly do multiple strikes with a lot of these, and having these preset animations makes me think that the blades might be exclusive to the left side, like they are in many previous Armored Core games, rather than being able to dual wield them, although I could definitely be wrong on that. Next we see the scan function for the first time. Enemies are revealed and can be locked onto through walls. I love this. being able to peek ahead and think about your strategy is so much better than always being forced to figure things out on the fly.
Yeah, Remnant has this with a, like, there's like a certain weapon mod that does this.
It enables planning based on your build, followed by execution of that plan with your reflexes and your coordination, and that is peak Armored Core to me. Speaking of customization, though, next let's talk about build assembly
here we go.
in the garage, which is another huge design pillar of Armored Core.
Oh my
so
god.
Here we thankfully get an overview of all of the part categories in Armored Core 6. Here are your 4 weapon slots, your 4 frame slots, and then your booster, your FCS lock-on part, your generator, and an expansion
well, yeah,
slot.
what's that?
This is fewer categories than most Armored Core fans will be used to. Inside parts, hanger weapons, radiators, those are all missing here. That said, the parts that we do see previewed here...
I haven't played any of the other Armored Core games. I think the last mech game that I played was Mech Warrior on the Nintendo 64. So it's been a while. So I don't really know, like, if those things actually added interesting gameplay mechanics or not.
Do have some great depth to them, so I think that might make up for having fewer categories. For example, your generator, which governs your energy, now has cooling built into it, rather than radiators being a separate part.
Okay.
And then certain weapons,
So they just
like
combined
this
a couple
laser
of them.
dagger, can perform a charge attack, if held, which is a depth to the gameplay. We also see certain ranged weapons that have this charging property as well. And then there's missiles, which have unique attack characteristics, you know, as they always have, but their descriptions here are more detailed than ever. Some are capable of multi-lock, which is when missiles fire at multiple targets, which I showed off earlier. Some missiles are better for AoE, creating a damage area. Some are better for staggering enemies, like these, which contribute greatly to build-up of ACS strain. And some missiles will just be great for taking out airborne enemies, like these, which are deliberately slowed down. Missiles hound targets during lengthy airborne time, enabling heavy pressure tactics.
Okay.
All these build considerations are such a fun, amazing part of Armored Core that I can't wait for people to discover. And if you're a new player, I think a lot of the time you will be able to get by simply reading these written descriptions. But the real endgame in Armored Core is learning to understand the complex stats and specs of each part seen down here.
I feel like these stats aren't super complicated. I'm gonna be honest. I feel like you can understand this. If you are interested in the game, you can understand it. Just wait. Okay.
Though,
all right,
if you
that
think these stats are overwhelming, I've got news for you.
Oh god.
So this is probably the simplified version. It reminds me a lot of Armored Core 4, where you were shown the most important stats on parts, but then you could toggle the display to reveal this. Yeah, so stats can get pretty intense, and while having a simplified view and glanceable icons is obviously the more modern approach, I really hope that they don't shy away from these overwhelming stat screens, because they are such a hallmark of the series.
I have to agree with them there. Yeah, I think that they should have the super complicated stats. Maybe it's not like super important and everybody's just going to look it up on, like, you know, some website on what to do. So at least give the people that want to know life, at least give them that kind of stuff. Yeah.
In the showcase, the player actually accessed this garage mid-mission after being destroyed by this quad-legged enemy. Their mid-range biped build was having a lot of trouble dealing any kind of damage to this enemy at range, so they wanted to change their build to an agile, close-range one instead. And they did it all manually, and it took less than a minute, and it was so convenient.
Oh, wow.
Instead of having to do the entire mission again, they simply died, they loaded up the garage from the menu, they tweaked their build, and then they returned to the checkpoint that they had unlocked in their mission.
I really like that, because one of the things that kind of sucks in Dark Souls and also in Elden Ring is the fact that whenever you commit to a build, you have to keep playing that build because you upgraded all the weapons and stats for that build. I like the fact that, like, you know, in, for example, Sekiro, you only really have one build, so you don't have to worry about it as much. But overall, I like being able to swap and change what I'm doing more dynamically.
And they were back with a different build completely.
Yeah, I don't like being locked in.
As to the fight itself, There's actually so much to break down in this fight, but the main thing I really want to talk about happens here, where they finally stagger the enemy. Whereas in Sekiro, this would enable an execution on stagger, in Armored Core 6, it's up to you to fully deliver that execution. The enemy is now taking extra damage, so if you have burst attacks, now's the time. What's more, it seems you can prolong this staggered state with certain attacks, keeping them stun-locked with the right combo, potentially, which might give a really high skill ceiling to this whole process.
Yeah, I would expect so. That's actually really cool.
Here, you can hear a narrator say, "Alright, tourist, that's enough." That's because the enemy leader of this facility has been shit-talking you this entire time. The dialogue that I heard was witty and well-delivered, and that is a very welcome change from past Armored Core games. There was also some banter between this narrator and your own female operator, who is there to support you through your missions and warn you about what's ahead. And a main boss is ahead. But before this, in the demo, the player actually called a resupply drone, replenishing their health, their repair kits, and their ammo, and then it was time to fight this thing.
Is that like a bonfire?
Boss that has its own health and stagger meter that appears at the top of the screen. Its attacks are extremely well animated and telegraphed, and it has a ton of area denial and AoE, and it's just so well animated, and it looks like such a great fight. It also has 2 lock-on points, a weak spot at the front, and a shoot at the top, which I guess flying builds might be able to take more advantage of. I wonder how a slow tank build would deal with something like this.
The respect.
It seems like it would be hard to get distance and dodge with a tank, hey? Anyway, as promised, let me recreate...
Yeah, I guess I'll have to find that out, because you guys know I'm never going to respec for this.
The heads-up
I'll just face roll it over and over until I eventually kill it.
The most important things. First up is your AP. Your armor points, or your health, basically, which was displayed numerically and with a slider around here. When the player took damage, this number and the slider would obviously deplete, and the screen would also distort a little bit, especially at the edges, which you can kind of see here.
I see.
Then there was the energy gauge seen around here. This was depleted by things like flight, quick boosting, and I think melee as well.
So it's almost like your stamina.
Of course, in Armored Core, how big this bar is determined by the capacity of your generator part, and how fast it depletes and recovers is determined by the energy output of that generator and the cumulative energy drain of all of your parts. Of course, the efficiency of your boosters will probably also play a part. Above it was a stagger bar. It was empty by default, but would fill up with orange from the center, just like this, whenever you took damage, and then it would deplete if you didn't take damage for a few seconds. The same goes for enemies. If you get staggered though, I think you just sort of pause for a couple of seconds, and previous interviews seem to suggest that you'll start falling if you're in the air as well.
I think that makes sense, right? I mean, yeah, all that makes sense.
Like a box here.
That's good.
For the expansion slot. So extensions are a category of parts that have traditionally allowed you to do unique things like jam enemy radar, shoot down enemy missiles automatically. Sometimes these extensions were activated manually, sometimes they're passive, and they're like my favorite part category in Armored Core because they give a ton of character to your build. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure the demo had no expansion part equipped, so this box was empty. Next to it were 2 bars. One was a visual indicator for your repair kits, of which the player had 3.
Okay, so those are your heals, basically. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's exactly where you would have expected it to be.
Armored Core has never had an Estus Flask equivalent before, but it does now.
Yeah.
These can be activated instantly to heal the player. And it seems they can be replenished at supply stations, which can be called in certain missions.
Yep, Estus Flasks. Yep.
Underneath repair was a bar that said scan. When activated to scan surroundings for enemies, this bar would take a little while to regenerate, and then it could just be used again. It wasn't long though, like 10 seconds between each scan maybe. On the bottom right were 4 familiar weapon slots. They showed your total ammo and your remaining magazine ammo for your left arm, left back, and right back weapons, respectively.
So you've got 4 weapons.
This character has missiles on their right back, a machine gun on their right arm, a shield on its left back, and a blade on its left arm.
That's nuts. Holy shit, you got 4 weapons? Oh my god.
Now, a recent interview stated that all 4 weapons are bound by default to all 4 controller triggers.
Yeah, that's
and
what
that
makes sense.
All of your weapons can be fired at once, which is not how it's worked in any previous game.
But but the thing is, that would be really cool if you could use all of them at the same time.
That sounds kind of insane, honestly, and pretend you're holding a controller. I cannot fathom, for the life of me, how you're supposed to fire all 4 weapons with your pointer and middle finger, and then doesn't that just leave your thumbs free for assault boosting and moving and interacting and changing weapons? Just your thumbs for all those actions seems very difficult, so I'm extremely keen to get a hold
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, people, yeah, claw grip, that's what they do.
of a demo and see what the deal is here. There was a vertical speed gauge on the left, there was what looked like an altitude gauge on the right, there was even a compass at the bottom that was actually pretty cool because it had red dots for all of the enemies around you, which I assume would actually be pretty useful when helping to locate the enemies that are just outside your field of view.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Then the mission objective was written top left, a waypoint marker was on screen for that objective, and killed enemy credit rewards would pop up on the bottom right. Of course, as mentioned earlier, the center of the screen features your fire control system, your lock-on, essentially. It's circular like it was in Armored Core 5, and while you're out of combat even, it stays in the center of your screen, and it has these sliders that help you keep track of your remaining magazine capacity as you fire your left and right arm and back weapons, which
I'm glad they have that, because that way you don't have to be looking around constantly whenever you're in the middle of combat to see how many shots you have left. Yeah, that's really good.
I'm a huge fan of. So the UI is...
And I think also, like, having a more involved UI is kind of part of what being in a mech game is. I feel like I'd be fine with a more minimalistic UI, but in a mech-based game, I don't complain about a more complex UI, because, like, that's the aesthetic of being in a fucking, like, a walking tank that shoots 4 different types of attacks, right? Think about how many, like, menus and fucking, you know, sensors and, you know, graphs it's showing you. Yeah, that's just how it is.
Nice. It's super clean, and it displays
part of the
a ton
fantasy,
of
yeah.
information. But it's this lock-on behavior that I think is the most fascinating thing about Armored Core 6 so far, and this is the part of the UI that I kind of love the most. So again, when you get in range of an enemy, this lock-on element jumps over to them, while the lock-on display itself starts to display that enemy's health and stagger meter at the top, in addition to your ammo in the bottom left and right. Inside the lock-on, though, there's this little number which dictates how many of your missiles will go to this enemy should you fire them.
Sure.
Again, if you're soft locked on, that number will be split between nearby enemies, and if you're hard locked on, all of the missiles will go towards them. Additionally, the lock-on actually updates with an enemy's distance from you, which is extremely important information because staying at optimal weapon range is a really big thing.
Yeah, it showed that earlier.
And it also shows little damage numbers which pop up as you pop off, and
oh, thank
that's
God.
really important to give you visual feedback on the effectiveness of your range.
Yeah, I feel like any game that doesn't have damage numbers is like an automatic L. I've never felt like a single game is better without damage numbers.
Effectiveness of your weapon type. You want to know if you're dealing damage, and I always loved this feature.
PoE, I don't like that PoE doesn't have it.
So I'm very glad to see that.
I wish PoE
return.
did have damage numbers.
I even noticed some little enemy status words pop up around the lockbox, like unaware would pop up if the enemy didn't know you were stealthed, and ACS load limit, I think, popped up if you staggered them. So this lock-on is doing a lot of heavy lifting in Armored Core 6, and I love it. I'm glad they've baked so much information into this UI, because that is such a huge part of what Armored Core is all about.
Yeah.
And what their design team deserves props for is the fact that they've baked all this information in while keeping everything looking sleek and unobtrusive. It's very
That's,
clever.
I think, the biggest challenge with doing Armored Core is the fact that they know that they have like a huge fan base of people that play every single game that they make. So they know that they're going to have a lot of people that are playing Dark Souls, playing Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring, that are going to be playing Armored Core, of course. But they also have the fans of Armored Core series that also want to be, you know, they want a new game that's Armored Core. So it's like, how do you meet in the middle and make a game that like appeals to both of those, like probably very large audiences of people? So I think this is especially like it's a complex task.
Design, and I hope they show off the HUD soon, because I'm probably just butchering it in Photoshop now. I have so much more to say about this demo, but it should probably wait for when we get new footage, or for if I get my hands on it, if I'm lucky. In the meantime, if you're curious about Armored Core, then please check out my recent video where I show off every single old Armored Core game. And
yeah,
I think that video will just
curious about that.
Always stand as a way for you guys to learn a ton about the series.
Holy shit, there's a lot of these. Oh my god.
And I had an amazing time playing all of the old games. But until next time, thank you for watching. I also want to say special thanks to Con from Bandai Australia for getting up at midnight to pass me this footage. That was so appreciated, and it's honestly half the reason I had enough time to edit all of this for you guys. So thank you, Con. And the same goes for Steven at Bandai and countless others.
I've also had universally good relationships and experiences with the people that work at Bandai Namco. They've been really great and awesome to me too.
Just enable these kind of demos and previews behind the scenes. Thank you. And if you're a content creator who couldn't get access, then you're more than welcome to react to this video and to this footage. I hope that helps somewhat. But thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.
What a nice guy. He knows. Okay, so let's see. All right, so this is the actual gameplay. Let's watch the actual straight up raw gameplay. Here we go. Okay. One thing I want to draw attention to is that if you actually look at the design of this game, and I'm sure that it'll change a little bit between now and release, but if you compare the design of this game and like the complexity of like these different structures, etc., to the Star Wars game that we watched yesterday, the Star Wars game has infinitely more complexity in terms of fidelity of what each different thing in the world looks like. And even then, I kind of prefer this more. And I think that we're going to get to a point where graphics are very well, like they're very easy to achieve, but a really good looking thing that nobody cares about doesn't matter. And that's one thing that I noticed with the Armored Core fight against like the large robot, is the fact that like if you looked at that robot closely, you would see that like it's not really like a super complex design. It's not like this is some next gen graphics. It's just stylistically designed to look awesome. And I think that achieves two different things. It makes it easier probably to develop to a certain extent because you spend less time into it. And also it makes it more accessible for a larger scope of platforms. Because now you're not dealing with something that has like these, you know, fucking a million polygons inside of every square inch of the screen. So more PCs can play the game, and it still retains that base stylism that I feel like this game achieves really well. And I love good graphics. I'm a huge fan of good graphics. Awesome. But stylized graphics go out of style a lot slower than good graphics do. Good graphics come and go. Like think about a game that had great graphics 5 years ago. Who gives a shit about it now? Think about a game that had a great style 10 years ago. People still love it. So those are the lock-ons. Okay. Yeah, I'm really impressed by the hitboxes in this game, too. Okay. I don't think they gave this game as much time and work as Elden Ring. Oh, I don't think so either. I think this game is going to be much smaller in scope than Elden Ring. Absolutely. Like, Elden Ring is like their, like, Lord of the Rings extended edition trilogy. And yeah, and that's fine. Like, that's okay. They don't need to make every game as expansive as Elden Ring. Like, I'll say again, I think Elden Ring is the best game. Probably, it's one of the best games ever made of all time. It's incredible. But not every game has to be like that. Like, for example, you have something like Hades, like a small scope in game, but an incredible, amazing game by itself. And a lot of older games are not massive and huge in scope. They're just great games. Yeah, Vampire Survivors, yeah. I just want a great game. It doesn't need to be my forever 10,000 hour video game. It just needs to be really fun and well designed. Like, that movement is so fucking good. Holy shit, that is insane. You also have way less games since they take longer? Yeah, of course. But yeah, like, again, look at the design on, like, the walls here. Not hyper complex. If you compare that to a lot of the games that we see now that are being developed, like the ones that we've seen a lot of these expos recently, the AAA ones, the AAA games nowadays have way more, like, you know, just fucking complexity in the design. And you know what? I don't care. I don't give a fuck. Because games that have great graphics, I look at them and I say, wow, that looks really cool. Damn, that's awesome. And I never play it. But I look at something like this and I'm like, man, I want to play this game. Graphics are like sprinkles on a cupcake. They make the cupcake look a lot better and more appealing, but you're not going to buy a cupcake for the sprinkles. Yeah, you do. Well, quit it. That's dumb. Yeah, you've got, like, all the different things, like cooling speed, all that stuff. Let me go back and just look at it. Generators, okay. Capacity, weight. I think that, yeah, these are probably, like, different breakpoints for weight. I think that's interesting, too. Okay, cool. I wonder if you can play a full melee build in this game. I bet not. So he dodged that? Jesus, he missed. Oh my god. The iframes? Yeah, what the fuck? So he has like a force field around him? Nice. So this is the big boss right here. Combat looks fun? Yeah. Are you gonna play the PvP of this game? It would be cool to try. I feel like the PvP of this game would make me more excited than, like, even Elden Ring, kind of. So I guess, like, the different, these things have, like, more vulnerability points or something. Maybe, like, on the top or something. Holy shit. Music sounds so good. Yeah, it does. Dash acceleration's crazy, yeah. Games like this, I feel like a lot of them are all about the movement and just like the playability. To me, that is the only thing that matters, and if that's not right, and you have like weird iframes, or there aren't iframes, or there's some sort of like bad hitboxes, etc., things that are, what do you call it? Like things that are non-responsive, that is like, ugh, we don't want that. And what we do want is, in my opinion, at least, precise fucking gameplay. Precise, responsive, quick gameplay. That is the main thing that matters to me. Whenever I look at a game, that is what matters the most. And I feel like Armored Core, after seeing all this stuff, I think we're going to get it. I do. I think we're going to get it. VaatiVidya, if you guys don't know who he is a massive he's probably like the biggest content creator for like the Souls series and like, you know, Dark Souls type games. Makes insane fucking lore videos. I've watched probably like 20 of them. I was gonna say 50. I don't know if he's even made 50, but I've watched a lot of them. Yeah, it's very, very good. I see New World hired the new lead game designer for AOC. The dev from New World got hired as new lead game designer for Ash's Creation. Yeah, I saw that. I think that's probably a good thing, but we'll have to just wait and see. The new big graphics, very consistent way to sell games, sadly. Well, that's because people get really excited about new graphics, right? I get that. Like, graphics are nice, they're good, but I'm not going to go back in 10 years and think about, like, oh, wow, this game's graphics was very good. I think that, like, there were, like, benchmarks of games that were just, like, so graphically insane for their time that everybody talked about them. Like, Final Fantasy X, Half-Life 2, I'd say maybe Witcher 3, Crysis, Doom 3, Doom 3 whenever it came out for, that was a 360, had very good graphics. And there's probably Cyberpunk, couple of other ones, etc. New World was a benchmark for MMOs at least, and I mean, I feel like there's a lot of games like that that you do remember, but they're very few and far between, and most games are not like that. So yeah, I mean, Armored Core, I am massively fucking hyped for this. Doesn't this come out in like a couple of months too? It's not like we have to wait for like 3 years for this, like we did with Elden Ring. Yeah, it comes out in August. Like, what the fuck? That's in 2 months. That is insane. Oh my god. So many good games. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, keep that in mind. I feel like, yeah, we're used to what happened with Elden Ring, and it's like, oh, this is gonna happen, you know, come out in like a few years. No, man, like, it's gonna be a long fucking time. And so, it's gonna be not a long time. It's not gonna be a long fucking time. It's gonna be really fast, and I think that's awesome.